neurochemical basis for evil. The American philosopher William James has stated, "There is no doubt that healthy-mindedness is inadequate as a philosophical doctrine, because the evil facts which it positively refuses to account for are a genuine portion of reality, and they may after all be the best key to life's significance, and possibly the only openers of our eyes to the deepest level of truth." The Kabbalah, which literally means tradition, is the sum of Jewish mysticism, the tradition of things divine. The book Bahir, an 1180 AD document on the Kabbalah concerning Satan, states, "It teaches that there is in God a principle that is called evil, and it lies in the north of God. Of it is written, out of the north the evil shall break forth upon all the inhabitants of the land. That is to say, all evil that comes upon all the inhabitants of the land breaks forth out of the north." And what principle is this? It is the form of the hand, and it has many messengers, and all are named evil. And it is they that fling the world into guilt for. The Tobu is in the north, and the Tobu means precisely the evil that confuses men until they sin, and it is the source of all man's evil impulses. In early Egyptian tradition, evil was associated with Set, the brother of Osiris. Set eventually killed his brother Osiris and dismembered his body, which his sister wife helped restore to life. Osiris was the great Egyptian god figure. Set is considered the white brother. In contrast, the early Christian religion and the Bible related evil to the fallen angel Lucifer, a word that means light and that can be construed to mean white. However, in the Middle Ages, for some Europeans, the devil took on an appearance of a black man with a long phallus, which has been modified as the present red-colored figure with a long tail and a long fork. In keeping with each of the above perspectives of evil, Webster's dictionary defines evil as 1. Morally bad or wrong, wicked, depraved. 2. Causing pain or trouble, harmful, injurious. 3. Threatening or bringing misfortune, unlucky, disastrous, unfortunate, as an evil hour. 4. Resulting from or based on conduct regarded as immoral, as an evil reputation. The Cress theory of color confrontation and racism links whites' unjust behavior towards people of color to whites' inability to produce melanin skin pigment in the skin melanocyte. The whites' numerical minority status in the world, and ultimately their fear of global white genetic annihilation by the genetically dominant, skin melanin producing, non-white world majority are pointed out as additional reasons for white aggression towards people of color. This thesis helps to explain the evil kill or be killed behaviors of the global white collective in relation to non-white people. In 1972, I presented a paper entitled Melanin, the Neurochemical Basis for Soul, at the annual meeting of the National Medical Association section on neurology and psychiatry. I theorized that the presence of melanin in high concentrations in blacks accounted for some of the observable differences in behavior between black and white people, noting the familiar saying, "Amongst older black people, the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. If it ain't got no soul, it ain't got no use." Also, I emphasized the song by James Brown, "We Got More Soul." Further, I pointed out that the most sensitive body areas are the areas most highly pigmented. 15 years ago, in a paper entitled Blacks, Hypertension, and the Active Skin Melanocyte, I posited melanin, among other things, as a possible neurotransmitter and the skin melanocytes as the foundation of the sixth sense, the basis for knowledge of the unseen, including a deeper knowledge of bad. I explained that if the melanocytes were sense receptors and melanin was a neurotransmitter, then the darker the skin, the higher the levels of hypertensions found. Primarily, this is true because people with darker skins are more sensitive to the energy currents around them. If those energy currents are stressful, they will be more stressed, increasing levels of hypertension. In 1987, at the first Melanin Conference, I discussed the Cress theory on the George Washington Carver phenomenon, suggesting that the skin melanocytes of this very black-skinned scientist enabled him to communicate with the energy frequencies emanating from plants. Thus, he was able to learn their secrets and purposes. Since my 1972 presentation on the neurochemical basis for soul, the neurochemical basis of evil has periodically come to my mind, begging that I outline my thoughts on evil as the antithesis of soul. I relate soul to order, spirituality, and the affirmation of life. I equate evil with chaos and destruction, especially the destruction of life. The discussion of evil takes on even more significant proportions in light of the increasing number of persons in this society who openly are proclaiming themselves to be worshippers of the devil being the arch-doer of evil, in contrast to worshiping God. Reportedly, these persons participate in the ritual murder of human beings. The concept of evil is not at all unusual in religious and philosophical discourse. Also, evil has been a frequent subject for literary exploration. Evil is approached less often in the natural sciences, including modern medicine. However, psychiatry is the one branch of modern medicine that has major antecedents in both religion and philosophy, and thus the topic of evil has found discussions who consider themselves scientists and scientific. The role of the psychiatric physician or physician scientist is to attempt to comprehend, bringing greater clarity and insight, the total spectrum of human behavior, which would include the special category of behavioral phenomena recognized as evil. Further, I believe that the challenge of modern psychiatry, like the challenge of modern physics, is to approach, if possible, a view of the unified field. Modern physics, since Albert Einstein, has sought to unite the spectrum of forces, gravity, electromagnetism, weak, and strong forces, in a unified field, viewing these separate forces as outgrowths from or manifestations of a whole. Likewise, modern psychiatry should seek to discover if there is a united behavioral force field that can explain evil as well as other dominant behavioral phenomena. For the ant, the greatest evil consists of killing ants. For the human being, the greatest evil consists of the obsessional degrading and killing of other human beings. All lesser evils are simply added to this. With evil so defined, clearly there is an overwhelming atmosphere of evil in the world. In fact, the entire planet exists in an atmosphere of degradation and murder. To ignore this evidence of evil, this obsession with mass killing and death, is only to participate in the establishment and the maintenance of its reality. In effect, to participate in evil. On the other hand, to address this obsession with mass death and the degradation of human life in hopes of countering it, is to affirm the dignity of human beings and the universe. Ernest Becker, in his book Escape from Evil, had the following to say about evil: all organisms want to perpetuate themselves, continue to experience and to live ... For all organisms then, opposing and obliterating power is evil. It threatens to stop experience. He continues, so we see that as an organism, man is fated to perpetuate himself, and as a conscious organism, he is fated to identify evil as the threat to that perpetuation. And what then would be the highest development and use of those talents? To contribute to the struggle against evil? However, before there can be effective struggle against evil, the following questions must be answered. 1. What are the dynamic conditions in a society or culture that would stimulate such activity as announced as devil worship? What are the dynamics in a society and culture wherein increasing numbers of black males are being killed daily, yearly at epidemic levels? 3. What are the exact causation dynamics in a society and culture wherein the greatest percentage of its resources are used in the development and production of instruments of death and destruction? What are the exact dynamic conditions in a power system or culture wherein 50 million people can be destroyed in the course of slave trade, as on the continent of Africa? 5. What are the exact dynamic conditions in a power system or culture wherein 6 million Semites of the Jewish religion can be destroyed deliberately, or 20 million people killed in the course of a war, such as in the Soviet Union during World War II? What are the dynamics in a society and culture in which hundreds of thousands, possibly millions, are doomed to die of infection with a virus that increasing numbers are concluding was deliberately man-made? These are questions that the psychiatrist should be motivated to answer in the context of understanding the issue of evil, especially when it is recalled, as stated by Thomas Merton in his Raids on the Unspeakable, that one of the most disturbing facts that came out in the Eichmann trial was that a psychiatrist examined him and pronounced him perfectly sane. We equate sanity with a sense of justice, with humaneness, with prudence, with the capacity to love and understand other people. We rely on the sane people of the world to preserve it from barbarism, madness, destruction. And now it begins to dawn on us that it is precisely the sane ones who are the most dangerous. It is the sane one, the well-adapted one, who can without qualms and without nausea aim the missiles and press the buttons that will initiate the great festival of destruction that they, the sane ones, have prepared. Psychiatrist M. Scott Peck, in his nationwide best-selling book, People of the Lie, The Hope for Healing Human Evil, contends, science has also steered clear of the problem of evil because of the immensity of the mystery involved, ... We do not yet have a body of scientific knowledge of human evil deserving of being called a psychology. He also states, those of us who are Caucasians seem to have fewer compunctions about killing blacks or Indians or Orientals than we do in killing our fellow white men. It is easier for a white man to lynch a nigger than a redusek. The matter of the racial aspects of intraspecies killing is yet another one deserving significant scientific investigation. He concludes, war today is at least as much a matter of national pride as of racial pride, even though Peck suggests that science has steered clear of the subject of evil because of the immense mystery involved. Herman Melville, the 19th century novelist, perhaps subconsciously, went directly to the subject of evil. He approached evil through the symbolism of the white whale, Moby Dick, and the crippled white ship captain who pursued him, Ahab. Melville uses an entire chapter of his book to discourse on the whiteness of the whale. He begins, what the white whale was to Ahab has been hinted, what at times he was to me as yet remains unsaid. Aside from those more obvious considerations touching Moby Dick, which could not but occasionally awaken in any man's soul some alarm, there was another thought, or rather vague, nameless horror concerning him, which at times by its intensity completely overpowered all the rest, and yet so mystical and well-nigh ineffable was it, that I almost despair of putting it in a comprehensible form. It was the whiteness of the whale that above all things appalled me. But how can I hope to explain myself here? And yet, in some dim, random way, explain myself I must, else all these chapters might be naught. Melville proceeds to detail many positive associations with whiteness, and though this preeminence in it applies to the human race itself, giving the white man ideal mastership over every dusky tribe, he continues, yet for all these accumulated associations, with whatever is sweet and honorable and sublime, there yet lurks an elusive, something in the innermost idea of this hue, which strikes more of panic to the soul than that redness which affrights in blood. That ghastly whiteness it is which imparts such an abhorrent mildness, even more loathsome than terrific, to the dumb gloating of their aspect, so that not the fierce-fanged tiger in his heraldic coat can so stagger courage as the white-shrouded bear or shark. Further on, Melville contemplates, what is it that in the albino man so peculiarly repels and often shocks the eye, as that sometimes he is loathed by his own kin and kin? It is that whiteness which invests him, a thing expressed by the name he bears. The albino is as well made as other men, has no substantive deformity, and yet this mere aspect of all-pervading whiteness makes him more strangely hideous than the ugliest abortion. Why should this be so? Again referring to whiteness, Melville writes, it is at once the most meaning symbol of spiritual things, nay, the very veil of the Christian's deity, and yet should be as it is, the intensifying agent in things the most appalling to mankind. Melville's Captain Ahab sees the white whale as all evil of which he is in pursuit. In a letter to Nathaniel Hawthorne, Melville referred to Moby Dick as a wicked book. My own interpretation of the symbolism in this novel, which has been regarded as the greatest of all American novels, is that the crippled white Captain Ahab represents the mutant white population, afflicted with albinism. The white whale is symbolic of racism, the major pursuit of the global white collective, the evil destructive goal of the global white collective. This furious, evil pursuit in Moby Dick ends in a disaster for all, a deadly end in which the white ship captain and all of his crew, whites and non-whites alike, are destroyed. Yet, one survived to tell the tale, foretelling the end of white supremacy as a specified power dynamic. It is not surprising that this novel containing the symbolism of albinism and white supremacy was written prior to the great bloody conflict that had so much to do with the relationships between white and black people. This conflict ended the power of the shareholders as well as the formal enslavement of black people by whites. Melville's linkage of evil and dread with the condition of albinism parallels my own thesis that the absence of the neuropeptide melanin, the absence of this black pigment in the skin, and other aspects of the nervous system critically impairs the depth sensitivity of the nervous system and the ability to tune into the total spectrum of energy frequencies in the universe. This deficiency of sensory awareness sets the stage for the absence of harmony, which is evil. Thus, the injustice and evil of white supremacy not only has its foundation in the numerical minority status of the global white population and its genetically recessive status in terms of melanin pigment production, But the very absence of melanin in the nervous system in significant degrees is an additional contributing factor in the problem of white supremacist injustice. White supremacy is the greatest known evil on earth. Likewise, racism, white evils we now recognize. Indeed, if the encompasses all of the lesser nervous system's ability to tune into the total spectrum of frequencies in the universe, rendering those lacking melanin incapable of acting in harmony with those frequencies, then it becomes incumbent upon those possessing melanin to counteract the evil.